Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the Rustic Von Lodge, the kitchen of the Rustic Von Lodge once again. It is my epic comic book Wednesday, at least it will be when you see this, I hope. This week's been a little dodgy. Let's hope it shows up on the right day. My epic comic book Wednesday. Every week, Steve Donoghue and I on our respective channels talk about a Marvel epic collection. We each give our opinions on that particular epic collection. And this week, we will be talking about this epic collection, the Black Panther, Panther's Rage. The Black Panther, Panther's Rage. So, this is the first Black Panther epic collection. There are 3 of them by now. This has Black Panther stories 1966 through 1976. So it has the initial Jack Kirby stories that introduce the character of the Black Panther. And then it goes on to some stories that take place in Jungle Action, which were the issues that I read when I was little. And I thought Panther's Rage, which is the main chunk of this epic collection, was a 12-part story plus an epilogue that took place in Jungle Action. And it was epic, and I thought it was a masterpiece when I read it as a small child. An epic masterpiece. You couldn't have changed my mind on that. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Reading it now as an adult, I can see some things that maybe aren't so great in this epic story, but you know what? There's a lot that holds up, and there's a lot that's pretty important in this story. The stories in this epic collection are actually pretty important and have been pretty influential. It certainly developed the character of the Black Panther, Wakanda, and Black Panther's world. So this is a pretty important piece of comic book history sitting right here in this epic collection. So the Black Panther arrived initially in an issue of the Fantastic Four. This is the Fantastic Four number 52, written by Stan Lee, illustrated by Jack Kirby. So those are the 2 fantastic comic book creators who invented the Black Panther. And here's the Black Panther there in action. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee came up with the idea of the Black Panther being the king of Wakanda, a country in Africa that has super high technology. He has all kinds of cool stuff. This king of Wakanda, because Wakanda has this super important natural resource, vibranium, which is super rare. And so, you know, they had the cash to develop all of this great technology, but they also have a traditional society, and the Black Panther is the king of his society. And I thought the Black Panther was really cool when I was a kid, because he was the only superhero who was a king, which was pretty awesome, I thought. And also the Black Panther had a super awesome costume. I loved that look. I thought that was just way cool when I was a kid. And you know, I still think the Black Panther looks way cool. Of course, we all know the Black Panther now because of the movie. Black Panther was a big budget Marvel movie, which I never thought in a million years I'd see. I never thought I would ever get a Black Panther movie. But you know what? I did. Amazing. So the Black Panther, which was a pretty good movie. It was a pretty good movie. I'm not sure it was as great as a lot of people think it was, but it was a pretty good movie. Some of the CGI special effects were outright terrible. It had some terrible effects in that movie. Not all of them were bad, but a lot of them were bad. But the movie itself was a pretty good movie, and they got a lot of that story right out of this. A lot of what you find in the Black Panther movie, the inspiration came right from Panther's Rage. Now, Panther's Rage was interesting. Panther's Rage, which showed up here in Jungle Action Comics. This was Jungle Action number 6, where the Black Panther shows up and has his own comic book series, which was pretty cool. There's Killmonger on the cover, a little bit different than we know Killmonger now. But this series was initially drawn by Rich Buckler, and the inking was by Klaus Johnson. And Klaus Johnson is one of the greatest comic book inkers in history. And it was written by Don McGregor. When I read this again as an adult, as an old adult, the one thing I noticed that stuck out to me right away is that this is a very wordy comic book. It's very wordy. It's very melodramatic. It's, well, I'll get to it. I'll get to the wordy and melodramatic part. Let's talk about a little bit about Rich Buckler, who is the initial artist in the first few issues of Panther's Rage. Panther's Rage, a saga of Wakanda and the Black Panther, and how he becomes sort of like a Shakespearean character in a way. Not just the melodrama, but, you know, he's got to keep his kingdom together. We've got Killmonger, the rebellious Killmonger, who's sowing doubt about the Black Panther. It's heavy stuff, let me tell you that. Now, Rich Buckler is the artist initially. Now, Rich Buckler has a lot of energy. He is a dynamic artist. His anatomy is quite dodgy. Yeah, his anatomy is pretty dodgy. Some of his backgrounds are a little Some of his compositions are a little But he has a lot of energy, and he's very, very dramatic. And there are some scenes of just sheer drama in this. Look at old Killmonger there. That is sheer drama right there. His fight with the Black Panther. So he has the drama and the energy going for him. He's also not averse to doing big dramatic set pieces like this right there, where the Black Panther is falling down a waterfall. That stuff was pretty cool, man, when I read this when I was a kid. Now, of course, the melodramatic characters are a little extreme, like people standing like this with their legs like 2 meters apart, you know. There's stuff like that in there that's a little, well, it's a little dodgy, but at the same time, some of these compositions work, and the drama really works. And it does help that you've got Klaus Johnson on inks, because he can forgive a lot when it comes to a penciler. So, yeah, these initial issues are pretty good, I think, altogether. I think it works. Despite some of the dodgy moments, some of the moments that don't work, and there are a few. I think overall, it's a pretty good beginning. It's got drama. And it's, you've got some cool stuff like that, double page titles there. They made very dramatic use of the titles, and I don't know if that was Don McGregor's idea or Rich Butler's. But it's some interesting stuff. Now, as I was saying about the wordiness, some of the dialogue in this comic, some of the dialogue would never be spoken, I think, by anybody. As I was reading this, I was wondering, well, maybe in Wakanda, they just talk like that. they're just super melodramatic in the way they say everything. Everything they say is full of meaning, and they say it, and they always say everything in the wordiest way possible. Um, maybe, maybe that's just how Wakandan sounds. I don't know, but it can be a little distracting. The writing in this can be distracting, although I do appreciate, and we do have some cool stuff. We have maps of Wakanda. We got Wakanda's royal palace. Stuff like that is really cool that they just threw in there. I do appreciate what Don McGregor was trying to do with this story. He was doing something that was unusual in that he had this big, long, super epic that was going to put the king of Wakanda, the Black Panther, just through all kinds of trials and tribulations. And the story just goes on and on, becomes more and more dramatic. It was an epic. And if you were reading this as they were coming out, you just been, man, this just keeps going, this story. There is an issue here that's illustrated by Gil Kane, and he's great because you've got Gil Kane and Klaus Johnson doing the art there for a bit, and that's just great. Gil Kane does some fantastic covers in this book, and this fill-in issue, he just does a really great job. That's very Gil Kane right there. You can always tell Gil Kane art, like, right away. His people always have a distinct kind of dramatic look. His comics always have a great dramatic look. And just look at that. That's awesome right there. That's fantastic. But then, after Gil Kane leaves, because he's just doing a fill-in issue, after Gil Kane leaves, that's the part right here. This is where this book becomes important, because this is where Billy Graham, the artist Billy Graham, shows up. Billy Graham was a really, really interesting guy. First of all, he was the only African-American artist at Marvel at the time. I'm almost certain that he was the only African-American artist at Marvel. I'm almost certain of that. Really interesting artist. He started at, was it Warren? I think he did Vampira. I think he was an editor over there, art director or something like that. And then he went to work for Marvel, and he started working on Luke Cage Power Man. And when he started, he was rough. He was always pretty rough as an artist. His stuff was always pretty rough. But if you compare his later work in this epic collection to some of the work he did earlier on Power Man, he got a lot better. His work got a lot more detail. Again, we have an artist here who's not always great on composition, but sometimes he is. Some of his anatomy is sometimes dodgy, but sometimes it's pretty good. And he had the benefit in this, because he was always a pretty rough artist, but he had the benefit of some pretty good inkers, and he has Klaus Johnson inking. This is his first issue. Great cover, by the way, Gil Kane. That's fantastic. And that is his first moment of glory, Billy Graham. And Billy Graham he did tremendous work on this, in that he was very influential. And he was, in a lot of ways, a really interesting artist. His stuff was visually very dynamic. Rough as he could be, and he could be rough. He also did some great detail work, and he put a lot into his panels. Some of the compositions were occasionally, like I said, a bit dodgy, but others were pretty great, actually. And as an artist, he was actually, in a way, kind of fearless. He wasn't afraid of doing stuff. He wasn't afraid of doing something unusual, or just different, and some of the stuff he did with Claus Johnson here was just dynamite. Some of the work in here, really interesting, really, really good stuff. Rough as it might have been on occasion, his stuff, man. Look at that. That's just cool. And his Black Panther, his version of Black Panther, it really stuck past this story. And you see in stuff like this, just as an artist, he's pretty brave. He will just do compositions like that. The way the Black Panther is drawn with his shredded outfit, it's just really cool stuff. This guy, this artist, he has his limitations. This is true. But he's just never afraid to go for it. And again, we have the wordiness. The wordiness just keeps getting wordier. The melodrama just keeps getting more melodramatic as the series goes on. Oh man, does it. We get some interesting stuff when there's an issue here where Billy Graham inks himself. And at this point, you can really see the roughness that I was talking about. This is issue number 16. You have the cool lettering, and all our past decades have seen revolutions. And of course, we've got Black Panther and Monica riding some turtles, as I guess you do in Wakanda. I guess that's just a thing that happens. So he is rough when he does his own inking, but it works. And it's just really interesting to look at. And you've got stuff like this. It's sort of Steranko-esque, this page, the way the text is laid out and the drawings are laid out. Really pretty cool stuff. You know, Billy Graham, you look at his stuff and he had a kind of, like I said, a kind of fearlessness about his work. He had a confidence in his stuff, you know? He was confident in his work. And I think that was just part of his personality. You know, eventually he disappeared from comics, Billy Graham. And if you were only a comic fan, you would think, you know, what happened to that guy? But he was into a bunch of other stuff, Billy Graham. He could not be tied down to one medium. He was a playwright. He wrote plays. He performed in plays. He did set design. He was a stand-up comic. I don't know if he was a good one, but he was a stand-up comic for a while. He was very much into the theater. And I suppose if you were, you know, a theater guy, that's where you would know him from. You wouldn't know him from the comic book work he did, because he was successful in both. He wasn't hugely successful, probably in either at the time, but he was a success in both of those things. And it's funny, he became... You'd see Billy Graham in movies, like in the background. Like there was a Woody Allen movie and he played like the security guard or something in the background. And there were other movies from the 80s where, you know, some extra in the background, that's Billy Graham. And because that's where he went after comics. He went to do that kind of thing, acting and being a playwright and set design and stuff like that. You know, he had the confidence that he went out and just did it. He just did stuff like that. I think his last comic book work was probably in the mid-'80s sometime. I think it was... Don't quote me on this, but I think it was on Power Man and Iron Fist. I think he did his last stuff there. It will forever be, I believe, Panther's Rage that he is remembered for. This is the epilogue to Panther's Rage. The gigantic epic saga comes to a close. That is really the thing you want to read in this. This has some good inking on it. This has Bob McLeod as inker. And he smooths everything out on Billy Graham's rough work. He smooths everything out and makes everything look really cool. There is a picture in here, if I could find it. Here it is. There's some gutter loss there, but that's just awesome. That's just an awesome with all of... yeah. It's just good stuff. Now, eventually, Black Panther goes back. The story, Panther's Rage, ends. There's some more stories in here by Don McGregor and Billy Graham, where Black Panther goes to America and fights the Klan, you know, because I guess that had to happen. And it has some moments that are not so great, and some moments that artistically, at least, are really interesting. But the kiss of death for that part was this, where the King of Wakanda is in a grocery store pushing a cart. Talk about the last thing you ever want to see Black Panther doing, or any great superhero. It's in full costume in the supermarket pushing a just don't do anything like that. I'm not quite sure what Don McGregor was thinking there. Not exactly sure, but that happened. But we get some cool stuff too as he goes in there and kicks the Klan's ass. Unfortunately, this book ends, eventually Billy Graham leaves, and that's not the end of the book. There's one more story in here that happens in Jungle Action number 24, but this turned out to be the last Black Panther story in Jungle Action for the Black Panther. And this is done by Rich Buckler, does the layouts, and Keith Pollard does the finishes. It actually looks pretty good, this story. But it ends on a cliffhanger. You know, the fighting is just about to happen, and then it just ends. Because what happens after that is Jack Kirby comes back to the book, which you think would be great, but it was terrible. Jack Kirby's run on Black Panther was... I don't even know how to describe it. It was just awful. I don't think I'll ever be talking about that. The less said of that, probably the better. But if you're curious, it's in the second Epic Collection. There's some great stuff as extras at the end of this Epic Collection. Don McGregor used to keep all of his plots and things in these envelopes, and we have all of that with all his plot notes. It's cool stuff. At the end of this, we get some rough artwork here, more envelopes. We got Don McGregor being all dramatic and some photographs from the olden days. This is a really interesting Epic Collection. This is a part of comic book history. Not sure what Steve Donoghue has to say about it. We'll see. But I think this is pretty important. And I think Billy Graham probably should be remembered a bit more than he is. I don't think he made it to any of the credits in the Black Panther movie, which is a shame, considering how much work he put in that character. Oh well, what do you do? That was your Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Kind of went on for a while. Sorry about that. Check out Steve Donoghue's video, and I will catch you next time.